So today we will be discussing how to personalize your emails, particularly with preferred name, although this wiki does reference using other profile attributes as well. And I know many of us have been longing to have this preferred name for different populations available within Salesforce so that we can really personalize our communications coming from Marketing Cloud. So in large part, we've pumped the brakes on this and told folks, you can't really use it for now. It might not be accurate. So it should be a good enhancement to roll out to those users who have a desire for it. So the resource that I'm looking at now is very much devoted to users as well as eComm specialists, just kind of an overarching approach to how we're looking at preferred name and the complexities that come in with eComm's data model. And so Jen went ahead and put together this awesome wiki, and step one, of course, is just identifying, like, is this population, is this report that I have, can I use personalization in it? Will using preferred name get me the end result that I want? And again, good news being now, if you have a report of students or employees or alumni and donors, there is a preferred name for each of those populations that you're able to drag into your Salesforce reports, get into your data extensions, and again, target your communications to that population. So as we've been approaching it up until this point, we've told users, don't use it. Better than calling someone by a name they do not want to be referenced as, just don't put that first name personalization in there, which seems to be a good solution. But moving forward, or I should clarify, the first name field that we did have in the system was tied to campus solutions. So I know UCCS was using it a fair amount in student communications, and that was accurate previously. But moving forward, one, we're not going to encourage using that first name field. And we've gone ahead and replaced it with a student-specific preferred name. But we've also enhanced it by now having an employee preferred name as well as that preferred name for alumni and donor populations. We're trying to think through some of the nuances here, and one of which that I'm really glad Jen highlighted is that you really need to be thoughtful about what group of people you're communicating with. And I guess to say that this is only going to work if the report that you're pulling in is only students, in which case referencing preferred student name. If you're looking at a population that's got a mix of individuals in it, in that same report, we're going to have to reference the same preferred name, and that may or may not be correct for those different populations. So we definitely want users to be mindful of that, but also you all, obviously, ultimately, as the ones creating these reports and data extensions. Our hope is that most of communications kind of fall with a very distinct population, or at least if they do, they're already separated out into different reports. But I want to hear from you all. Do you have examples where you might have one population, or sorry, one report that you're targeting a lot of different populations, being students, employees, and or alumni and donors?
Mel, I think probably the best example of this is not that we have multiple, not that we don't have multiple reports. It's more that we group reports to hit large audiences. And that tends to be executive communication, where you're going to hit students, faculty, and staff. Mm-hmm. So we have separate reports for all of those audiences, but we tend to then like send to all 6 audiences or whatever at once.
Yeah.
Would this make any difference for a person who is an employee and a student at the same time or anything like that? What happens then? I guess.
Spot on. So in a single send, assuming that you do have the default checkbox in Marketing Cloud of dedupe by email address, that is how it's going to dedupe, right? Not by subscriber ID. So if you had that person in two different lists with two different email addresses, they could get it at the same two communications, one at one inbox, one at the other. But assuming this person's on two different reports and two different data extensions, when you go to send, if it's the same email address, it's going to go row by row. And so let's say your student report was pulled in first, it's going to send an email to that student and say whatever their preferred student name is. When it gets to the secondary row or report, I should say, let's say they're an employee, that email is not going to go out. So they will not see the email preferred name. So it's really dependent on the order that they're in the list and that those lists are added to your send. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
So I have a follow-up question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious. So if I was just sending to one report and I am on that list and I am both an active student and an active employee and an alum, is it just because of the filter logic? It knows that it's an alumni list versus an employee list, so it knows which personalization to use?
No, you
Okay.
as the report creator are going to need to determine what field to use and getting that field into your data extension as well. So we'll get into those details in a second.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. For this user-directed wiki, step 2 for them is adding the personalization attribute to their specific email, which will read as either student preferred name, employee preferred name, or alumni donor preferred name, of course, with those percentage signs around it, ensuring it's a data tag that will pull in this data, either from a report or a data extension. But there's obviously a bit of a step in between these two items that y'all as eComm specialists are going to be really integral in. And so we have this other wiki referenced here, preferred name rollout for eComm specialists, that I have open here, and really digs into the details on how you as a MEC need to go about updating your reports, as well as updating your data extensions. I imagine there's a fair amount that are existing. And so there's some steps in there on editing the fields that exist and how to map that new preferred name field that is desired. And we can look at this in real time as well. Sorry. But the first thing that we're all going to need to do is update our existing reports. And so I think for the most part, we've been baking into our emails, just pull in first name. Like I said earlier, that first name, we're going to start phasing out. So what we're actually going to need to do is update existing reports. Of course, those that people want to be using for personalization. I am not advising we go ahead and do this for every single report. It's really, or at least prioritizing those where people want to leverage personalization. So if you're working in a student report, there is a student preferred name to start dragging into your report. Same goes for employee preferred name and alumni donor preferred name, all three of those coming from their source systems.
Mel, can I just do a little happy dance? This was not told to me. I was not informed, and this is a good thing, that this was happening. Because all we've been told about Ascend, and obviously Ascend isn't really going to launch, well, I'll leave that to another day, but we were told it was so MVP, like things like this weren't going to integrate. So I'm super jazzed because the way we've been doing it now, which I have not felt super comfortable about, is the export import data extension option where we add the field and then we do an X lookup and we manually put it in so they can't do the refresh in Marketing Cloud on the list. And it's like, you better use this list right away that we built you. If you let it delay a week, these folks aren't going to be up to date on there. So thank you. Oh my God, what a fun surprise.
We'll take that win.
Yeah.
I did think of the alumni donor populations for sure. And is it your general approach, like you would always rather personalize than not, or?
We do a lot of personalization emails. So I agree with you. I've always been as a marketing person, like, just don't put a name. I get they can do a little bit better. I've got to tell you, in looking at our stats, they don't do all that much better.
Fair.
But people here just sort of like culturally very, very much want like joint and formal Sal, which is, dear Nancy and Gil, thanks for your donation. It happens all the time for us. So like data extensions for our users have been utilized differently than for most, but it makes me feel squirrely sometimes. So this is really great news that it's just being integrated in to the report and will be always in real time up to date on opt-out information.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
won't serve you for that formal salutation or informal salutation, but at least this should be a good chunk to take off your plate.
Yeah.
And you'll also notice in like some of the reporting templates that we launched initially, I'm not sure how many of you still leverage these items. But just kind of as an example, that if we were to go pull up one of these employee reports, I should have already updated them all. We'll confirm or not. But looking at an audience of employees, I should have gone ahead and removed first name as we would see it typically here and have replaced it with employee preferred name. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there.
Well, quick question.
Good.
Is it the case that there will always be a value in the preferred name object? If my preferred name is Eric, then it will populate there automatically from my first name field. What if a person doesn't have a preferred name different than their first name?
I think a couple of different questions there, and Jen, I might need your help a little bit. No, it will not 100% be populated. Or I guess I should say student preferred name might not be populated if they were never a student, and same goes for employee. Alumni donor does tend to be more populated, but as far as first name, it is, and I do have it listed here actually. So this is part of that change management that we're approaching. So currently first name is good for student populations, but we need to start getting student preferred name, this actual field, drug into reports and data extensions so that we can migrate away from using what is currently the first name field. And the thought behind that is at that point, it would essentially be redundant that we have two student preferred names, like they're both coming from Campus Solutions and they're going to match 100% of the time in the first name field and the student preferred name. And so we want to change over the logic on this first name field where it would read legal first name. And so in that case, this will 100% be populated.
Eric, were you actually asking of like, what's the survivorship logic in terms of like, say your first name is Eric, but you have, have chosen to transition and now you are Erica. So Erica would be indicated as a preferred name, but if you have never indicated a preferred name, will it always read Eric? Is that the use case that you're describing?
Sort of. You were farther along that road than I, Erin, so thank you. My very basic question was, is there a risk that the preferred name field is blank and then your efforts to personalize a correspondence will fall flat because it just says dear preferred first name? And then the second question had to do a little bit about timing and the nice way Erin put it, how the timing of the change will work in those fields.
Mel, I can jump in here too if you want. I got here a little bit late. Eric, yeah, when you're looking at a report in Salesforce, you will definitely see some blank names in there because we're not reverting these preferred ones. Like the fallback on these preferred ones is not a legal name. We're only looking at preferred names for these three columns. So it is possible that it is blank. what we do have, which Mel, I'm not sure if you have covered this yet, but when we put the first name attributes into Marketing Cloud, we are going to have some default values. So for example, if you're sending to a list of employees and using employee preferred names, if there are some blanks on there, Claire is going to do something where instead of like dear and, you know, a blank spot or something like that, it'll be like dear colleague for employees. And if it's a student and that value is blank, it'll be like dear student or something like that. So there will be some fallback logic in Marketing Cloud. In Salesforce, you will definitely see some blanks for these fields.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniela.
Yeah, of course.
Daniela, is that if we're using Marketing Cloud connector and not a data extension? I guess I wasn't following how that fallback logic was built.
Jen, do you happen to know? I know Claire is out today. She's the one working on that logic.
Yeah, so Claire is building the profile attributes in Marketing Cloud, and as part of that process, it allows her to specify a default value. So it's just all happening on the Marketing Cloud side.
Okay, and so basically what's happening then is if we use that bracketed value and we don't have to do if then logic because Marketing Cloud will know what the default value is for blank. And so
Exactly.
like dear student or dear colleague or something like that.
Yep, exactly.
Got it.
And I honestly, Aaron, kind of have the same question, not seeing it in practice yet. Like, so that's how it should work, but we don't have those personalization tags within Marketing Cloud yet. We're trying to get the reports and data extensions updated first, so that users don't see those personalization and start using them before they're ready. But a good thing for us to confirm next week when we do push it. I guess another important note, you're not going to see these all these preferred names on the actual contact. So if you're looking at your own contact and not seeing them, no surprise, but they are reportable. So you should be able to start dragging them into your reports. And then the other important piece here will be updating existing data extensions, or of course, just kind of including this information as you create new ones. But it is nice that we can update existing data extensions. And I might actually pop out just to show, why not? That we want to go into subscribers and Salesforce data extensions and actually open up your data extension from there. We should have reset a couple things before I got started. Let me do a couple things and then I can show what we're talking about. I'm sorry, y'all, I'm just going to create a new one real quick so it's accurate. And in this initial example, I'm not going to include any of these preferred names so we can see how we would add it after the fact. But of course, still got my email. Alrighty, so I am going to start this guy, give us the full experience. All right, so if I go look at this guy in my subscribers, Salesforce data extensions, got my one record in there, and we can look at that specific record and see all the columns that I included. And so in order to go ahead and, let's say now I went ahead and updated a previously existing report and added like employee preferred name in here, and that's what I want to start using. It's going to be important for me to copy the exact name of this data extension. And then on this side, you might notice that, well, I guess I'll show this error message first. On the properties tab is where you're able to edit fields. And so that can be removing a field, and that can also be adding a field. But one thing I've noticed is if you try to save fields, it's going to let you know that it might not be able to do that because it already contains data. So before you start trying to add new columns in here, it is important if there's any data in your data extension to go back to records and clear it. That will take a second to process, but at that point I can go back into my properties and edit these fields and add my employee preferred name as desired. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my first name as well. It always takes a while to save these fields. I'm not special.
I'm gonna ask a dumb question, Mel.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is nullable? And because I've always been clicking nullable when we're doing these like data extensions where I'm adding in joint informal cell or allocation description that tag to the email tags, or that like the data extension talks to the tags in the email. I was taught, I'm just gonna laugh, you know, not by you, that I click nullable or it's not gonna work. So what does it even mean?
And I honestly could have a question for Danielle on whether or not I should be selecting it or not. Nullable just means, could the value that you're uploading be blank? Got it.
Like in the data, like in the Excel sheet, it may not have a piece of content in it. It's just, it's still, you can still upload it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like the cell would be empty, but it's still going to accept the data versus if it's not nullable, and it's going to be like, we can't take blank data, so we're just not even going to import that row at all.
Okay.
Erin, you have a question?
I do, and once again, this may be where you're headed with the demo, so you know you can be like, stop. But for those audiences with the Venn diagram, and I think probably one of the most common that many of us will have will be the employee who is also a student populations. I'm just kind of trying to think through best practice implications about includes and excludes for those audiences, and I didn't know if you were going to get there.
I did not have an intention to. I hadn't thought thoroughly on that one.
So, as I've just been trying to think of the downstream implications. Say I'm sending an executive message that's going to cross employees and students. I could do 2 separate sends, send to the students using the correct salutation, then send to the employees and suppress my student list, possibly, so that I don't end up using SIS preferred first name.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of just this out loud in terms of what would the best practice be. And then, you know, I think we've all had this conversation. Is it really a personal email when you email 45,000 people? Probably not. But what do we want to do with salutations for those audiences? Like do 3 sends or?
Yeah. And in your example, are you sending the exact same email or are you doing separate emails because they need to be separate anyway?
No, it would be the exact same text.
So, oh, sorry, Mel, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't know how that functions. Like,
Okay, so in the using profile attributes such as preferred name wiki that I don't remember if that's exactly what it's called, but Mel, if you go to that wiki, I have a little blue notification message that asks this question and or that, you know, raises this question for users, like, should I send multiple emails if I'm trying to use preferred name for different audiences? And perfect, yeah, right there. So I mean, I do think this is a question that people will ask and that we need to be prepared to answer. What I'm telling the users here is that they need to be mindful of, you know, they need to work with their eComm specialist to be mindful of the correct inclusions and exclusions based on their goal. But I also have in the section above about do not use preferred name that, you know, if you don't want to do separate emails, you could just say, dear friend, or ask yourself, like you just said, Erin, is personalization really necessary in an email to 45,000 people? Or is this maybe not a use case? I don't know if that helps. I mean, I think it's just a kind of a philosophical question that we might need to work on with our users.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the conversation that we have on a regular basis, and we in general, for those really large sends, recommend, you know, dear students, faculty, and staff is the salutation, or dear CU Boulder community members. But I can, you know, part of the reason we've been having that philosophical conversation is a desire for personalization from the message's authors. And so I'm just trying to game out, if I had to personalize to a really large audience like that, it sounds to me like I would at least have to do 2 separate sends. And then I would have to prioritize which audience wins in terms of preferred name, and then send to that audience and then suppress that audience from my second send.
Yep, that's what we do with the president's newsletter. And we have the settings to prioritize faculty and staff.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about if we want to do preferred name with that audience, but yes, we're doing it kind of a similar thing, more just to get separate tracking data for different audiences.
Well, and right now we pull that separate tracking data at the report level, but
yeah.
Ugh. Why can't we be Pepsi and just have one relationship with a person? Come on.
I wonder if a SQL solution could, like, if there could be code inserted instead of just the preferred name field that would do that prioritization so that you would only have to do one send, potentially.
Yeah, Tracy, we had talked about that at one point in time that, you know, did we want to start to make decisions about using logic to populate preferred name based on, you know, the data that we have about a person. And there was some concern from the group at the time that different individuals might want to use a different preferred name depending on the source system that they're in. And I think there was some anxiety about, you know, making an assumption. Although, I mean, you know, I get it. Like my preference would be one preferred name as well, but I think there were some concerns about.
I'm thinking in Marketing Cloud when we're doing the sends,
Oh,
that
okay.
instead of having to create different sends for the different audiences, we could
Mm-hmm.
use some code to do the prioritization within the actual email. Maybe.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting idea. And maybe we can make a note to run that by Claire when she's back in the office tomorrow.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It'd definitely be worth testing, but just how I was talking about, just how it dedupes people by email address, I would almost think just by way of sending to your student, like selecting your student list first, it's going to get to those records first and send, and not send with their like employee first name. It just might be achievable by the order at which you add your reports and a single send. But I haven't tested. Alrighty, back on the marketing cloud side, I will go ahead and import this lovely little data extension. Again, I had just removed what was already in there, being the first name, and replaced it with a preferred name. We'll see how long that guy takes to run. When we go ahead and look at my record now, I no longer have that first name field in there, but the employee for first name is populated there. And so show you a similar example, not that guy, this guy, where I'm going to mess up student preferred name. So what we don't want to have y'all doing is if when you were editing your field and trying to add, let's say student preferred name, you named it incorrectly. Oh yeah, I forgot. I need to remove all these records first. And I'll go back to my properties and add it again. The next time you go to interactions and import and try to start your data extension, it is just going to fail. And I did this with this guy earlier. When we look at the file history, the 2 times that I had a misnamed column in there, there was nothing to match on. The entire import fails. So definitely something you want to avoid. I did take a note on do a bit more advice on best practices when you do have mixed audiences. And I intend on updating it. Well, Jen, do you have more insight on our timeline? I believe we were shooting for the 18th next week to make these personalization tags available within Marketing Cloud.
Yes, that's what we are hoping. But part of this conversation, I think, is to understand your comfort level with changing reports and data extensions using the processes that we've discussed. I mean, ideally, it would be great, right, for all of us if we could get this rolled out by the time the semester starts. But I think we can be open to feedback with the caveat that Claire is going to be out of the office for a period of time. She's getting married, so she's going to be out for a few weeks. I think we're at a point where, depending on how all of you are feeling, we can theoretically make some adjustments. And Kayla, your question about standard contacts, Daniela and I were chatting about this in a separate window.
Oh,
Yeah, well, I mean, after you asked, not like coincidentally. But since standard contacts don't have constituent IDs, the first name field will be whatever we've entered as part of that upload process or as part of an event registration. So in the case where any standard contacts would be included in a report with individual contacts, it would default the preferred name to the alternate value, like friend, colleague.
oh, cool. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah.
Who out of the group is using the first name data tag we have today for personalizing student communications? only UCCS, eh? Well, great, that makes things easier. I guess decision's up to
we
you.
stopped. For
Okay,
once we started realizing that it wasn't super reliable, but without Shrivanth here, I can't speak 100%. And he supports way more student-focused communications than I look at on a regular basis.
sounds good. Well, we might need to touch base with him. So I think that 18th deadline that we were shooting for is one, getting the personalization tags actually available in Marketing Cloud for users to select. But also is pivoting away from using this first name field. And mentioned earlier that the logic around this, we'd want to be looking at legal first name. So at some point, it's not going to be good for student communications. And we were trying to target the 18th for that. Is that concerning to you, right? That you would need to either update reports that you're using currently to now point to the student preferred name, or you would need to make sure users know, don't use the first name anymore.
From my standpoint, I feel like I need to kind of do an audit to see who all is using the first names, because I'm honestly not really sure. But I feel comfortable that we could probably get an email out at the very least, just saying, hey, update your content, and then we can adjust later. So that could be a good path forward for us right now.
Yeah, Shannon, and one of the things that I'm working on is communication to users that will announce some of these changes. Because one of the things that we were a little concerned about is that, you know, once we add these profile attributes to Marketing Cloud, it's totally possible, right, that someone is going to see student preferred name and be like, oh, perfect. And they're just going to
Yeah.
select it.
Uh-huh.
Without knowing. So our hope was to get ahead of that a little bit by sending a communication in advance of the day that those fields would appear, so that the users would have time to kind of digest this information and then work with you to address their needs. So depending on how you want to approach it, I mean, maybe you don't need to rebuild all of your reports and data extensions by the 18th, but I almost think like maybe between an email from us and maybe some additional follow-up with your users, like you're saying, you could determine, where the needs are and which groups you want to address first.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And I think, I'll reference some of these wikis in that email, but I think, the real message that I think we want to drive home to the users is that you should stop using the first name field or begin, moving away from that. But if they want to use their preferred name fields, that they need to work with this group to make that happen.
I like that approach, so thank you.
Okay. And yeah, Tom, I see your question here about the new names can be used in personalization from a report, and it doesn't have to be a data extension. That is correct.
Well, I guess I'll add, I don't think that's going to work today because those personalization tags don't exist, but once they do, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
With a report.
Yeah. Don't do it yet, Tom.
Trying to think of anything else we might have forgotten. Such a good question, Kayla, on the standard contacts. That one did not dawn on me. Jen, when do you think we need an answer on whether or not we are content moving forward with those changes on the 18th. And Aaron, I realized Rob is not here, which will want his consent beforehand.
Yeah, and Trevant will be back. He'll even be back just later this afternoon. So if you're able to share this recording with them,
Cool.
and should be able to follow up with them pretty quick.
Awesome.
You know, I guess I would look to all of you. I mean, if we could get an answer, I think we need to get Claire's answer about, you know, adding any logic in Marketing Cloud as Tracy suggested, to try and tackle this that way. I should be able to get that answer from her tomorrow. So I guess, I mean, ideally, it would be great if we could maybe know by Monday if this is something that everyone's comfortable with rolling out on the 18th. But I realize some of that will depend on what Claire's answer is, and if there's any, you know, changes that she needs to make that could preclude the 18th as our date.
Yeah, I think we're in the best case scenario, having that most people haven't really been using it. So what a great time to roll out some changes and hopefully enhancements that folks want. Tom, I do want to clarify your question for standard contacts. Are you thinking of importing like employee preferred name into a standard contact?
No, I was just brainstorming. Hopefully I'm tracking what she was asking. I was thinking of contacts we add into Salesforce, you know, the unmatched contacts. Can we somehow map and then in Excel have a preferred name column, throw it in there, and if they were included in a report we were sending to where, you know, let's say 20 of them were regular contacts with a preferred name, but then we had to add 4 more people. Could we just add that field, preferred name, created in the contact field? Could we create contacts? I mean, not that I'm doing that often. But there are some here and there, a few, you know, these. I'm just thinking like football season and stuff.
Yeah. I am not positive. You know, we don't have that field on there today, but Jen, Danielle, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. If that is a need that y'all have, I think it's something we could meet you with.
Sure. There, you know, it's great that you guys are advocates, right? And I won't, you know, I'm not going to jump the gun or anything. I'll wait till it's proven and tested before I do anything with just inserting it, you know.
Yeah, I can jump in, Tom. Well, I don't think there's anything like inherently wrong with it. I am cautious about it because the preferred names for individual contacts are all coming from source systems. They're getting updated when it's updated in a source system in real time. So adding preferred name to standard contacts is just going to be something you do once and then it's never going to get updated again. So that's what I guess why I hesitate. You know, it's not going to be part of the integration and we'll probably end up with some bad data in there. If someone changes their preferred name, like it would be entirely up to you to manage it for the people you want to do it for.
And are we still removing unmatched contacts? I can't remember since we're on our own org now. Do we purge those out every 6 months? Which if we do, that's fine. No.
No, we're not purging them.
Okay. Because I was thinking if we got rid of them, that's fine. I mean, when I make a list for this type of thing and I create contacts, I mean, most of the time, you know, it's a one-time deal, right? And I don't reuse a list I'm accessing it, but I guess I can't honestly say. I mean, I'm probably touching those contacts other ways that I don't even know, you know. That's the only kicker. But I see what you're saying. And we've gotten by this long, so you know. It's only good.
Yeah. And I'll add too, you know, if you have an Excel sheet with employee preferred names for all but 4 people and you want to add it for those 4 people before you put it into Marketing Cloud, that's, you know, that's entirely on you, of course. It's really just the Salesforce side. Yeah, that if we were to have names for standard contacts, would not get updated.
Yeah.
Kayla, did you have any needs? Were you thinking you would want a preferred name for your standard contacts?
I mean, no, that's not like necessarily a priority. I just know sometimes we don't have, let's say, a first and last name for an organizational contact that like our development team is trying to include in a communication. So their first and last name ends up being friend of CU. Or something like that. And then we never know, like, wouldn't want that person to be like, dear friend of, if that ended up popping up as their, placeholder name. And sometimes we just don't have names and we won't ever have names. So that's why I was asking.
Gotcha. I used to do friend of, now I do friend, and the last name is of CU for that reason.
Ah,
No, it's just friend.
clever. Yeah.
All righty. I know we're a little bit over, but thank you all for all of the comments. So many things that we didn't necessarily think all the way through. So I appreciate all those thoughts. And I will go ahead and get this recording out to the group for those who couldn't be here. And keep on rolling with those updated reports and data extensions, and we'll follow up